Hello Thrivers, Michelle here. Today I am focusing on how narcissists erase your autonomy. We're going to talk about what is autonomy, what it looks like to have it, what it looks and feels like to not have it, and how to get it back if somebody did erase your autonomy. So let's jump right in. So I found it interesting that autonomy, the word itself, comes from the combination of two Latin words, self and law. Together, it means that you govern your own life. In other words, you endorse your own actions. So obviously you can still be influenced by outside factors, but even when you are influenced externally, your behavior always is a reflection of your choices, of who you are. When you have autonomy, you have the ability to feel separate and whole. In other words, in a relationship, you may be in a relationship with somebody, but it's not enmeshed. You know who you are, you know where you end and the other person begins. And if you're not in a relationship, you still feel whole. Okay? People that wind up with narcissists often lack autonomy or have their autonomy erased. So let's kind of talk about what it looks like to have or not have autonomy. When you lack autonomy, you're more controlled by what other people do, what they think, what they feel, and you adapt to them. You react to and worry about someone else's expectations, what their reactions are, especially when they differ from your own opinion. Because of that, you have difficulty making decisions and taking action on your own because you're so influenced by the opinion of other people. And so I want to give you a few examples of how a lack of autonomy shows up in codependent narcissistic relationships. And I'm going to give you some examples of like little ways that you can see it so that you can evaluate if this is taking place in your relationships or within yourself, okay? So somebody that lacks autonomy has difficulty holding on to their own energy and emotional states. So for example, let's say I love coffee in the morning, which I do, and I'm downstairs and I'm enjoying my cup of coffee and I'm feeling so peaceful and I'm excited about the day. And if I'm in a relationship with a narcissist, that narcissist is always evaluating my emotional state. And the higher emotional state I'm in other words, peace, joy, happiness, love, those emotional states that I'm in, the narcissist hates, because then they have a reflection of their true emotional states, which is mostly anger and shame. So what they do is they have to have an energy exchange. So a narcissist that sees me happy will do something, sometimes overtly, sometimes covertly. Maybe they'll insult me for something I did or didn't do. Or maybe it's just this look of contempt. And suddenly, if I don't have autonomy, that peaceful feeling is gone. And now I'm like completely reacting to their emotional state. And I'm thinking I did something wrong and I lose my joy and I lose my happiness for the rest of the day. That's not having autonomy. Their emotional states govern everything you do. A person without autonomy is always reacting and altering them to the benefit of the other person. Another example of a lack of autonomy would be, let's say I had a passion. Let's say my passion was reading, right? Reading books. That's how I'm addicted to reading, which I am. So if I was in a relationship with a narcissistic person, then every time I read a book, I would also be met with something negative, a dirty look, a comment about what I should be doing with my time. You know, how dare I take 5-10 minutes for myself? And done over a period of time, what happens? Suddenly you look back on the hobbies and passions that you had, and they're non-existent because you lost that autonomy. The autonomy was erased because of constantly reacting and adapting to what the other person is thinking, feeling, and doing. So it's a real problem if you're in a relationship or you have family members that are narcissistic, because you can completely lose yourself. Sometimes in my face-to-face coaching, I'll give tips on how to get that autonomy back. And they're really simple things. But the problem is that when you've been surrounded by narcissists from childhood and then in long-term relationships, there are things you never even realize you're capable of. And I want to talk about some of those things that I often talk about with my face-to-face clients, because hopefully if this is resonating with anyone and anyone is feeling like they can't be themselves, and every time they are themselves, it's met with so much negativity that they stop being themselves to accommodate the other person, you're going to want to try these tips. The first tip is the need to develop and change your mindset. And that mindset is that you need that person to feel how you feel so that you can hold on to your feeling. Okay, let me explain that. We often recognize that narcissists expect you to see only their perspective. Their perspective is the only perspective that exists. So when you've lived like that for a long time, you forget that you're allowed to have your own perspective, that you're actually allowed to see things differently, because you're not allowed in the relationship, right? So you lose the permission inside yourself. You stop giving yourself permission to hold on to your reality unless it can receive the approval of the other person. So that means if you're happy and that person says something negative, and because they're not happy that you're happy, you stop being happy. You can't hold on to your happiness because they're not happy. But the truth is that they're allowed to be mad. They're allowed to be miserable. We don't like it, but they're still allowed. It's not your job to make them see your perspective, just as much as you don't want them to force you to see their perspective and only their perspective. It's about letting go and saying, oh, there he is, or there she is, miserable in the morning again. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I know how to enjoy my coffee or my tea, no matter how their energy is. God, it feels so good. It feels so good to just be in my own skin. So it's about giving permission, noticing their emotional state while noticing yours, and giving permission for both to exist. The next thing that will help you to start strengthening your autonomy is when you stop sacrificing your independence. And when I say independence, what I mean is you don't have to have the same thoughts, feelings, and emotions. You don't have to be one in a literal sense. If you're married, yes, you are like one person, but that doesn't mean that you can't have two thoughts, two perspectives, two emotional states, two different hobbies that you enjoy, or ones that they do that you don't enjoy. You're allowed to still be a unique, separate individual. So if you have a passion and that person hates it, criticizes it, and there's nothing wrong with it, rather than sacrificing what means something to you, you start allowing that person to be mad, allowing them to be angry. Of course, if you're in a dangerous situation and this person is physically abusive, some of these tactics will not be appropriate, because the real thing that you should be doing is seeking safety. But these tips are for emotional and psychological abuse, okay? So let's say your passion is reading, your passion is art, your passion is singing, and they criticize you each time you do it. Rather than stopping, you notice the criticism, you allow it to be there. You don't like it, but it's not your job to force them to be different than who they are, right? You allow them to have their perspective, but you also allow yourself to have your own perspective. And you can use your inner dialogue to strengthen it. You can say something like, there they are criticizing my passion. Oh well, it sucks. It sucks that they do that, but I'm so glad that I still give myself the opportunity to enjoy it. I love this. I'm so happy that this is still part of my life. It's a tiny piece of what makes me me. And you use your inner dialogue to validate and build yourself up. Another tip in order to be autonomous is start establishing healthy relationships. Now, I know it's hard right now with quarantine, but the reality is if you have been with a toxic person a malignant narcissist, your friends are usually flying monkeys of the narcissist, and you're not really still able to be you. The friends or family members that you had, you probably have been isolated from. Well, if your life isn't in danger and you feel it's safe physically, then you need to start establishing healthy relationships. Relationships where you can really be you. Not relationships where you're supporting the lie of the perfect family, right? You want relationships that allow you to be your authentic self. That's got to strengthen your autonomy. Something that will help your autonomy is to have positive self-talk. In other words, listen to your inner voice, because when you start doing that, it can be kind of scary, or actually shocking, I should say. When I started for the first time listening to my inner voice, I realized I was so mean. I wasn't mean to anybody else, but man, was I mean to myself. And when you're putting yourself down, your self-worth, your self-value with a negative inner critic, it's hard to feel value. You need to have self-value in order to have autonomy. So start listening to what you say to yourself and change that by developing a compassionate dialogue. If you don't know how to talk to yourself in a kind way, whenever you do something, whenever you make a mistake, and let's say you come down really hard on yourself, ask yourself, would you say that to a child? Or would you say that to someone you love? And if you wouldn't, then you shouldn't be saying it to you either. Something else that helps you to strengthen your autonomy is to start listening to your emotional states and honoring them. So if you're doing a lot to the point of exhaustion and your inner self says, I can't do that, but you're not listening to that because you're so focused on what the other person wants you to do, even though it's to your detriment, every time you stifle your needs to do something that hurts you by trying to please somebody that's not going to be happy with it anyway, you are weakening your autonomy. So it's about being able to listen to yourself and honor yourself as an autonomous person. If you're supposed to do 10 things that day and you get to the 9th thing and you're exhausted, and you're like, I got to do this tomorrow, I'm like exhausted. Well, respecting and honoring your autonomy is recognizing your limitations. And if you can't do that and you have to do it the next day, then you honor that. Otherwise, I get a lot of clients that push themselves to the point of illness, and they still don't get the love and respect that they deserve from the toxic relationship. So you have to be able to listen to yourself and say no. Sometimes I'll ask my clients, I'll say, what would happen if you said no? What do you feel at the thought of saying no? What comes up inside of you? And they'll say something like, I'm scared. And I always want to make sure they're safe. So I'll always ask, if you say no, is something physically harmful going to happen, or is your life in danger? And they always say no, it's just the anger. The anger of the other person, the thought of their anger, the thought of conflict is what keeps them pushing themselves to the point of exhaustion or illness. And there's this thought that's been ingrained usually from childhood that they have to do everything to make sure that person isn't angry. So they're pouring themselves out, they're doing so much that they're getting sick just to try to make somebody else not be angry. And that's denying their needs. That's not allowing themselves to be autonomous. The decisions they're making, they're not endorsing. They're feeling forced to do it, otherwise a very severe consequence is going to happen. They're not doing it willingly. So a lot of times we'll work on learning to be comfortable when somebody else is angry and upset. If their life is safe and it's just about being able to stand firm when somebody's angry, that's what we work on. And what they start to realize is that the person's angry all the time anyway. The only difference is when they honor themselves and they strengthen their autonomy, they feel more grounded inside and they feel more like themselves. Like they're functioning from a place of self instead of a place of, I don't even know how to describe it, a place of I don't know, it's almost like prison. It's almost like slavery, where you're giving and you're having to do things that are against your will in order to appease a person. Something else that I encourage people that have lost themselves in narcissistic relationship is to find their core values again. Oftentimes I'll ask a client, who are you? And they have two identities. They have the before identity of who they were before the relationship and the identity of who they've become as a result of the relationship. And I always ask them, well, which is the real you? And they realize that the real them was the person before. But the reality is that because of the relationship, they are no longer living in harmony with their own core values. Rather, they're striving after pleasing somebody else because of the values of the other person. And the core values of a narcissist are, you live to serve me. It's all about me. Your perspective doesn't exist. No matter what you do, it's never enough. And that's the system that they're living in. Those are the core values that they find themselves spitting in, and it brings out the worst in a person. So I encourage you, get out a piece of paper, write down the values that you had before the toxic relationship, or if you've never had the chance to have your own core values, get in touch with what the core values are that you want to have, and start looking at your life and seeing if you're living in harmony with those core values. Now, I want to say that all of these tips are for you, okay? They are not to change the narcissist. I think sometimes people think, if I do this, then the person's going to change. That's still living not in your own autonomy, but rather reacting to what the other person needs, okay? The more autonomous you are, the less narcissists are happy with you. They don't want you to be autonomous. They want you to be extensions of them. But nobody should have to live as an extension of someone else. God himself gave every single person free will and the ability to be autonomous. So who is another imperfect person to try to take that from you? If you're struggling to apply any of these in your life, remember to check out my links in the description box below. I offer all different kinds of services, from video courses to a 3-month interactive workshop and face-to-face coaching with myself. So if you're struggling, please check them out and see if any of them resonates with you so that you can continue to deepen your journey.